I never thought warm smiles hid sharp blades. An ordinary day, I entered the office, pale light, air heavy. Shoes clicked on cold stone, drawing me into a dangerous maze. In the meeting room, two familiar voices hushed, eyes cold, masking with fake warmth. One fumbled papers, hands shaky. Another's slick smile gleamed sinister. Memories of their loyalty turned toxic. "Morning," I said, voice tight, gripping coffee to hide the storm. "Ready?" one replied, eyes dodging. Their smile was frost. I sought truth, found lies. A chill woke instincts. Trust was a trap. Later, venomous whispers tore my name in a plot. Breath caught, heart pounded. They thought me prey, but they erred. A fire ignited, ready to burn all. This wasn't a game. It was war, and I was the target. I'd make them pay. I never imagined the people I trusted the most would be sharpening knives behind my back. It was an ordinary Monday morning when I first sensed it. The subtle shift in atmosphere that hangs thickly in the air, like a quiet storm gathering strength beneath a calm sky. My footsteps echoed faintly on the polished marble floor as I approached the conference room, my daily routine suddenly feeling foreign, uncertain. Mike and Sarah were already inside, their conversation hushed, abruptly stopping the moment they saw me. Their quick exchange of glances sent an uncomfortable ripple through me. Sarah nervously shuffled papers, avoiding my gaze entirely. Mike quickly adjusted his collar, clearing his throat awkwardly, a forced smile stretching unnaturally across his face. For a brief moment, an old memory flickered vividly through my mind. Mike, eyes brimming with gratitude, thanking me profusely when I'd saved his job after a disastrous project 2 years ago. And Sarah, tearful, genuinely moved, promising to never forget how I'd supported her against harsh criticism from upper management. Those memories had always been sources of quiet pride. Today, they tasted bitter. "Good morning, Jason," Sarah finally spoke, her voice falsely cheerful, eyes locked onto the documents as if they held secrets. "Morning," I replied softly, placing my coffee mug onto the polished oak table. My fingers tightened slightly around the warm ceramic, feeling the faint trembling as unease seeped beneath my carefully maintained calm. Mike's fingers drummed lightly, nervously, against the table's edge. We're just prepping for the client meeting today. Everything's under control," he said, still forcing that smile. "Great," I nodded slowly, deliberately holding eye contact a fraction longer than necessary, searching silently for cracks in their facade. A brief silence followed. I felt a sudden chill crawl up my spine, a sharp and uncomfortable sensation I hadn't felt in years. Trust, I realized bitterly, is a fragile illusion easily shattered, and the cracks were already beginning to show. The following days passed with a growing, uneasy restlessness. Everything seemed normal on the surface, yet the intuition within me became sharper, like a ghost slowly materializing through dense fog. I kept observing, hoping it was merely paranoia, though deep inside, I knew my instincts were rarely wrong. On Wednesday afternoon, I happened to pass by a small, rarely used office at the end of the corridor. The door was slightly ajar, voices clearly drifting out. I intended to keep walking until suddenly my name was mentioned. My body froze instinctively, and something urged me to stay and listen. Sarah's voice emerged first, clearly irritated. "I told you, Jason won't be as easy to take down as you think. He's cautious, too intelligent." Mike responded, his tone low but decisively firm. "But if we do it right, he won't realize what's happening until it's far too late." I stood motionless, my grip tightening around my phone until my hand ached, my breath catching painfully in my throat. I couldn't believe it. My own ears were capturing the voices of the two people I had trusted most, plotting openly against me. The ambient sounds of the office faded away, replaced solely by the furious rhythm of my heartbeat. Sarah spoke again, quieter now, but colder, dangerously calm. "Are you absolutely certain everything is in place?" "Of course," Mike replied, a smugness briefly coloring his words. "We just need the right timing. Jason won't suspect we have everything necessary to make him step down willingly. The sound of moving chairs indicated their impending departure. Quickly, I stepped back around the corner, my heart pounding so loudly I feared they could hear it. In that moment, I felt both bewildered and angry, yet strangely calm. Minutes later, after confirming they'd left, I entered the now empty room. Everything appeared neat, as if no secret conversation had ever occurred here. I sank into a chair, feeling the subtle chill of the air conditioning brush my neck, a coldness nothing compared to the icy sensation spreading deep within my chest. A persistent question kept echoing in my mind. What had I possibly done to provoke such betrayal? Glancing around the small, quiet office once more, I stood up slowly and made my way back to my own desk. Sitting down at my familiar workspace, I finally faced the bitter truth. I was now entrenched in a silent battle. For the first time in all my years as a leader, I wasn't certain if I was truly prepared for what lay ahead. Returning to my office, I gently closed the door behind me, allowing myself to settle into the familiar stillness that now felt oddly uncertain. A faint beam of daylight filtered through the large window, casting a cold, sharp line across the polished surface of my desk, like a dividing line between reality and the illusions I'd carefully constructed over the years. I sat down slowly, clasping my hands together tightly enough to realize my palms had grown damp with cold sweat. My heartbeat was still elevated, and despite my best efforts, my breathing remained uneven. Closing my eyes briefly, I fought to suppress the chaotic thoughts racing through my mind. A rational voice echoed insistently within me, clearly warning. If I confront them immediately, Mike and Sarah will simply deny everything. I'd end up looking paranoid in front of the whole company, possibly handing them the perfect opportunity to destroy any crucial evidence. I opened my eyes again, fixing my gaze upon the steady, rhythmic ticking of the wall clock. Each sound seemed amplified now, emphasizing the deep sense of isolation I felt. Taking a slow, deep breath, I steadied myself, determined to regain control over my emotions. This wasn't the first betrayal I'd encountered in my career, but somehow, the hurt this time was sharper, more profoundly bitter. Yet, precisely because of those past experiences, I knew one critical truth. Impulsiveness would inevitably lead to failure. I had to remain patient and calm. Rather than confronting them prematurely, I would quietly observe their movements, pinpoint the weaknesses in their plan, and carefully collect the evidence needed to protect myself effectively, discreetly. Gradually, I loosened my grip, feeling my body regain its familiar equilibrium. A familiar, cool-headed calm slowly took hold of me again, reaffirming my confidence that I was still very much in control. My decision to stay silent wasn't born from fear or weakness. It was deliberate, a calculated strategy. I would defeat them not with hasty confrontation, but with patience, composure, and razor-sharp intelligence. Late that Friday afternoon, I was still sitting in my office, carefully reviewing every last detail of the media plan scheduled for presentation next week. The room was quiet enough that I could distinctly hear the scratch of my pen gliding across the paper and the subtle hum of the air conditioner. This peaceful concentration shattered abruptly when a sudden, urgent knock echoed through the silence, sharp, insistent, nothing like the usual polite tap I expected. "Come in," I said, looking up with a slight frown at the unexpected interruption. Jessica, my personal assistant, immediately stepped into the office. Her face was pale, eyes wide with unmistakable anxiety, and her hand tightly gripping a small black object. One glance at her anxious expression was enough for me to realize something was seriously wrong. A chill ran sharply down my spine, unsettling me instantly. "Jason," Jessica nearly whispered, her voice clearly trembling. "I found this just now while tidying up your office. It was hidden carefully underneath your desk." I took the object from her outstretched hand. The moment I noticed the tiny red indicator still blinking steadily, my heart skipped a beat. It was a secret recording device, still active. A wave of dizziness passed over me briefly, and I felt my legs tremble involuntarily. I quickly gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself, the gravity of the situation striking me harder than I'd anticipated. Immediately, Mike and Sarah's faces flashed vividly through my mind, but I swiftly silenced that thought. I knew I needed clearer evidence before making accusations. Drawing a deep breath, I struggled to keep my outward composure intact in front of Jessica. "When exactly did you find this?" I asked quietly, my voice edged with suppressed tension. Jessica glanced nervously toward the office door, still slightly ajar, as though fearful someone might overhear our conversation. "About 10 minutes ago. At first, I assumed it had accidentally fallen from somewhere, but when I noticed it was still active, I realized immediately that something serious was happening. Without hesitation, I knelt down to examine the exact spot Jessica indicated. The device had been carefully concealed, almost invisibly attached, too meticulous to be accidental. This was deliberate, calculated, a strategic move against me. Slowly rising, I clenched the cold, metallic recorder tightly in my fist, anger mingling bitterly with a deeper sense of betrayal. Jessica's anxious voice broke the silence again, clearly shaken. "Who do you think could have done this, Jason?" I looked straight into her worried eyes, keeping my voice as steady as possible. "I'm not certain yet, but whoever is behind this will pay dearly." At that moment, I knew without a doubt the battle had truly begun. I had no choice but to brace myself, carefully preparing for whatever darker challenges lay ahead. Returning to my chair, I quickly drew the blinds shut and locked the office door, instinctively ensuring no one could witness my distress. With trembling fingers, I inserted my headphones into the recorder and took a shaky breath before pressing the play button. The audio began quietly, filled initially with a familiar, comforting hum of background office noise, voices murmuring, the distant sound of footsteps. My own voice soon emerged, clear, composed, authoritative, but almost immediately, a chilling realization seized me. The sentences flowing from the device were mine, yet twisted beyond recognition, skillfully stitched together from fragments of conversations to create an entirely false narrative. "Sarah simply isn't fit for leadership," my voice said icily, detached and condescending. "Too emotional, too unstable. Frankly, she's a liability." I felt the room tilt slightly, gripping the edge of my desk to steady myself. My pulse quickened painfully in my throat. The recording relentlessly continued. "And Mike? He's lazy, completely unreliable. I'd never trust him with anything important. He's dead weight to this team." My vision blurred momentarily, a surge of nausea threatening to overcome me. I could recall these snippets, casual remarks, playful banter from entirely unrelated contexts, now twisted into a cold, ruthless portrait of someone I didn't recognize. My words, so familiar yet now alien, echoed in my ears with malicious intent. Then came a new shock, even more damning. "The senior management doesn't know a thing. They're blind. It's easy to manipulate them. Soon enough, this entire department will be under my complete control." I snapped upright, violently pulling the headphones away, heart hammering furiously in my chest. I felt as though I'd been punched. Every breath was painful, ragged. Not only had they crafted a false image of me as cruel and manipulative, but they'd strategically included allegations of arrogance and betrayal against upper management itself. Rising abruptly, I paced back and forth rapidly, fists clenched tightly enough to whiten my knuckles. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind, visions of colleagues hearing this audio, their faces filled with shock, suspicion, disgust. I saw clearly the catastrophic consequences if these recordings became public. My reputation, career, and credibility, everything I had painstakingly built over years, could collapse in a matter of moments. A bitter anger surged within me, raw and primal. Mike and Sarah had not merely betrayed my trust, they had deliberately and methodically constructed my professional execution. I stopped pacing, breathing hard, sweat beating coldly on my forehead. The magnitude of their deceit was staggering, unforgivable. Yet beneath my fury simmered a sharp resolve, crystallizing into determination. If this was how they had chosen to fight, then so be it. I would fight back. But unlike them, I would do it carefully, deliberately. I would dismantle their scheme piece by piece and expose them for exactly who they were. Standing motionless in the dimly lit office, I took another deep breath, trying desperately to regain some control. My pulse was erratic, fingertips numb, as I reluctantly replayed segments of the recordings again, forcing myself to listen, focusing on every subtle inflection, every damning word. Mike's voice emerged again clearly, oozing a cold confidence that sent chills down my spine. "Jason won't even see this coming," he whispered smugly to Sarah. "He thinks loyalty and integrity still mean something here. He's naive. That's his biggest weakness." My grip on the edge of the desk tightened involuntarily, knuckles whitening, teeth clenched hard. Suddenly, my elbow knocked a half-empty cup of coffee from the desk, sending it crashing onto the floor. Shards of ceramic scattered everywhere, dark liquid pooling slowly at my feet. I stared blankly, heart racing wildly, feeling as if the shattered cup mirrored my own fractured trust. Sarah's voice followed swiftly, steady, meticulous, almost clinical. "We have to ensure Jason never recovers from this," she said coldly. "If we leak these recordings properly, even his most loyal supporters will abandon him." I closed my eyes momentarily, a wave of nausea rising sharply. Sarah, whom I'd mentored tirelessly, whose career trajectory I'd personally championed, now stood poised to destroy me. Beneath the fury, an acute pain surged. This betrayal cut deeper than professional jealousy. It was personal, devastatingly so. But the recording wasn't over. Mike casually mentioned another name, John Cartwright, a respected senior board member I'd always considered an ally. My stomach twisted painfully as Mike continued confidently. "John's agreed. He wants someone less idealistic, easier to control. We've already spoken privately. He's promised to endorse my promotion once Jason is removed." I felt dizzy, the room spinning slightly as a horrible realization set in. I remembered seeing Mike and Cartwright whispering quietly in a secluded corner of the corporate gala a month earlier. At the time, I'd brushed it off as mere casual conversation. Now, the memory felt sinister, deeply unsettling. How long had this plot been brewing? Another troubling thought struck me sharply. If Cartwright, who seemed incorruptible, was implicated, who else might be involved? Suddenly, I questioned the trustworthiness of every colleague around me. Were there more silent enemies hiding in plain sight, quietly awaiting my downfall? I sank slowly into my chair, forcing myself to calm down. Though my impulse screamed to confront them immediately, logic warned clearly of the danger. Any rash action would provide them an opportunity to destroy critical evidence and deny everything, painting me as paranoid and unstable. No, I would remain silent, patient, cautious. But I would no longer trust blindly. My determination crystallized like hardened steel. If Mike, Sarah, and even Cartwright had chosen betrayal as their weapon, I would respond methodically, deliberately, and decisively. They had underestimated me gravely. Soon, they would discover the consequences of their mistake. That evening, I slipped out of the office quietly, earlier than I ever had, feeling the eyes of colleagues upon me. Eyes I could no longer trust. Arriving at my apartment, I locked the door behind me and immediately activated the extra security measures I'd installed years ago out of mere precaution. Suddenly, that caution felt frighteningly justified. The apartment, usually comforting in its luxurious familiarity, now felt like a cold, oppressive cage. The darkness seemed heavier tonight, thick with suspicion and anxiety. Walking into my study, I noticed something immediately out of place. My laptop lay slightly ajar, though I always carefully closed it before leaving. My heartbeat quickened sharply. Had someone else been here? Approaching carefully, pulse racing, I quickly powered it on. Within seconds, my suspicion was confirmed. Someone had attempted multiple failed logins, triggering an automated security alert. The realization hit me like ice water. How deep was this conspiracy? Was this an attempt to gather more evidence against me? Or to plant something far worse? Hands trembling, I quickly scanned my files, seeking any evidence of tampering. Nothing seemed altered, yet the sense of violation was overwhelming. I slumped heavily into my worn leather armchair, staring blankly at the dim glow from my laptop screen. Outside the window, the lights of the city sparkled coldly, indifferent to my unraveling reality. My mind reeled. Could Mike and Sarah, or perhaps even Cartwright, really have escalated things this far? How many people were truly involved? The line between friend and foe had dissolved entirely, replaced by shadows of paranoia and doubt. Suddenly, my phone buzzed sharply against the table, startling me out of my thoughts. An anonymous text flashed across the screen, sending a chill straight through me. "Be careful, Jason. You have no idea how high this goes." My breath caught painfully in my chest. The room spun momentarily, panic threatening to overpower logic. But as fear surged, so did determination. This betrayal was not just professional, it was dangerously personal, a targeted assault on every aspect of my life. They'd underestimated my resilience, assuming I'd crumble quietly beneath their manipulation. But I refused to play their game on their terms. Leaning back, breathing slowly, I steadied myself once again, a single thought crystallizing with deadly clarity. If they want war, I'll bring them one they'll never forget. Leaning back in the dim silence of my apartment, my eyes drifted to a framed photograph on the bookshelf, Mike, Sarah, and me, smiling broadly at last year's annual gala. The memory hit sharply, piercing through me with merciless irony. We'd stood shoulder to shoulder, celebrating our team's remarkable achievements, oblivious to the seeds of betrayal, silently sprouting even then. My mind flashed back vividly to that difficult evening 2 years ago, when Mike had burst into my office, frantic and panicked. He'd made a critical error on a high-profile project that had nearly cost the company a multi-million-dollar contract. Instead of reporting him, I'd spent hours overnight secretly rectifying his mistakes, risking my own reputation to protect his career. Mike's voice had cracked with gratitude as he whispered, "Jason, I owe you everything. I'll never forget this." Now, remembering his twisted, smug voice on the recordings, those same heartfelt words felt poisonous, acidic. Another bitter memory surged forward. Sarah, nearly in tears in my office, confiding her fears after being unfairly targeted by senior management. I'd stood up publicly in her defense, confronting powerful executives, risking my credibility to shield her dignity. Afterward, she'd hugged me tightly, promising loyalty forever. "Jason," she had said earnestly, eyes filled with genuine emotion, "you're the only one who's ever stood up for me like this." Yet now, the ruthless, calculating tone of her voice echoed cruelly through my mind, tainting every comforting moment we'd shared. The stark contrast between those moments of genuine camaraderie and the brutal betrayal now unfolding left me feeling utterly shattered. My fists clenched instinctively, anger mingling with deep sorrow. Had those moments of gratitude and friendship ever truly existed? Or had they merely been cunning performances designed to manipulate my trust from the very start? But the final blow came from another memory, one controversial and deeply unsettling. The evening I'd discreetly overheard senior executives hinting at major internal corruption. Mike and Sarah had persuaded me to stay silent, arguing passionately that exposing it prematurely would damage our team's reputation. I'd listened, trusting their judgment completely. Now, I realized bitterly, they hadn't protected the team. They'd protected their own hidden agenda, slowly laying the groundwork for my eventual destruction. A cold, steely resolve hardened inside me, eclipsing the pain. If they believed their betrayal would go unanswered, they were gravely mistaken. I'd shown them loyalty and kindness, only to be repaid with deception. Now, it was time they learned what it felt like to be on the receiving end of ruthless strategy. I sat motionless in my dimly lit apartment, my thoughts relentlessly dissecting the chain of events that had brought me here. It was painfully clear now. My greatest mistake was believing too deeply in the inherent goodness of others. I'd let trust blind me, granting undeserved loyalty, offering protection without question. I had mistaken friendliness for genuine friendship, Professionalism for integrity, critical misjudgments in an environment as ruthless as ours. A fresh surge of regret washed over me as I recalled yet another controversial decision from the past. Barely 6 months ago, I'd quietly dismissed troubling accusations about Mike misusing confidential client data. Accusations brought by a junior employee who later abruptly resigned under mysterious circumstances. At the time, I dismissed the young man's warnings, convinced Mike was incapable of such misconduct. Now, a nagging suspicion twisted painfully in my gut. Had I unknowingly shielded him, facilitating his deceit and indirectly contributing to this betrayal? Even worse was my blind spot concerning Sarah. Last year, when rumors emerged that she had deliberately sabotaged another team leader's project to clear the path for her promotion, I'd publicly vouched for her innocence, vehemently shutting down whispers of wrongdoing. I recalled vividly the shocked expressions on colleagues' faces as I'd passionately defended her, placing my reputation on the line without hesitation. Now, every memory of that day felt humiliating, bitter evidence of my naivete. The brutal realization tightened around my chest like a vice. These were not isolated incidents, but rather deliberate manipulations I'd willfully ignored, dismissing mounting evidence because I was too afraid of confronting uncomfortable truths. My excessive trust, my desperate desire to see the best in people, had become dangerous liabilities, exploited masterfully by those closest to me. In this ruthless corporate world, trust wasn't a virtue. It was a vulnerability. Loyalty wasn't rewarded. It was weaponized. Integrity, I realized bitterly, only made me an easier target. I rose abruptly, pacing restlessly through the darkened room, each step echoing loudly with frustration and self-reproach. How had I allowed this idealism to blind me for so long? My phone buzzed again, jolting me from my thoughts. Another anonymous message appeared, short but menacing. Your trust makes you weak. Everyone knows it. That's why you'll fall. Cold fury surged through my veins. Whoever was orchestrating this knew precisely how to wound me deepest, by turning my own beliefs against me. But rather than breaking me, their words hardened my resolve. From now on, I vowed silently, I would transform. Trust would no longer be handed out freely, but meticulously earned. Loyalty would be verified, not assumed. If ruthlessness was the currency required to survive and thrive here, I would master it fully. Standing still in the oppressive silence, I whispered harshly into the shadows of my room, my voice edged with steel. They've mistaken kindness for weakness. Now I'll show them how brutally wrong they are. That night, as the city slept beyond my windows, I paced restlessly through the shadowed apartment, adrenaline and fury battling against cold, calculated reason. Every instinct urged me to storm into the office tomorrow morning, confront Mike and Sarah publicly, expose their twisted lies in front of everyone, and tear apart their facade piece by piece. Yet beneath that burning impulse lay a colder, sharper voice of reason, reminding me of the dangers lurking behind impulsive reactions. Mike and Sarah had already shown their capacity for ruthless manipulation. If I confronted them now without undeniable evidence, they'd twist the truth even further, branding me paranoid or unstable. The thought of their smug satisfaction at turning my justified anger into self-destructive rage made me feel sick with fury. Then, as if fate itself mocked me, my phone screen lit up once more. Another anonymous message flickered briefly, cryptically ominous. They're expecting you to lose control. Don't give them what they want. My pulse quickened. Who was sending these warnings? Were they friend or foe? I tried calling back, but just like before, the number was disconnected, leaving only silence and more questions. Suddenly, a chilling thought occurred. Maybe Mike and Sarah weren't merely manipulating conversations. Maybe they were deliberately baiting me, hoping I'd lose control, knowing an emotional outburst would destroy my credibility permanently. Had I underestimated their cunning this whole time? My mind raced, weighing scenarios, each one darker and more tangled than the last. In this high-stakes corporate war, silence wasn't cowardice. It was strategy. If they wanted me to act recklessly, I would deny them that satisfaction. Instead, I'd give them silence, unsettling uncertainty, a slow, methodical counterattack they'd never anticipate. I took a deep, measured breath, letting clarity replace fury. My anger wouldn't vanish, but I could channel it differently, into meticulous planning and ruthless calculation. I would quietly gather evidence, documenting every misstep they made, every incriminating detail, every hidden connection. With a newfound determination, I silently vowed that I would not confront them prematurely. When the time finally came, my attack would be precise, unstoppable, and devastatingly complete. Let them mistake my silence for weakness. Soon enough, they'd realize too late. It was my most powerful weapon. Over the next several days, I became a silent shadow within the office, my every movement carefully calculated, methodical, and ruthless. Each friendly greeting was carefully masked, every casual interaction hiding my true intentions. Gone was my instinctive warmth and trust, replaced by a cold, strategic vigilance. My office, once a welcoming hub of openness, had become my covert command center. Late one evening, after everyone had left, I discreetly accessed the office's internal security system. Heart pounding steadily in my chest, I meticulously reviewed archived surveillance footage, searching specifically for suspicious after-hours meetings. Soon enough, I found footage of Mike and Sarah entering Cartwright's private office multiple times at unusual hours, footage that had seemingly been overlooked or deliberately hidden. Not stopping there, I methodically scanned internal email archives, carefully bypassing company firewalls, using a private VPN I'd never imagined needing. Buried deep within deleted communications, I uncovered troubling emails, coded exchanges between Mike, Sarah, and surprisingly, Cartwright himself, cryptic references to expedited timelines, and the necessary removal of obstacles. My pulse quickened. This was more than personal betrayal. It was institutional corruption at its core. Driven further, I discreetly planted advanced audio recorders in carefully chosen locations. The conference room, Mike's office, even the seemingly secure executive lounge. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was now employing the very tactics they'd used against me. Yet, unlike them, I felt no pleasure in deception, only grim necessity and icy resolve. Then, as if fate were rewarding my persistence, a controversial discovery emerged unexpectedly from Cartwright's own archived documents. Financial irregularities linked directly to Mike and Sarah. Undeniable evidence of bribery and misuse of company funds. My breath caught sharply as I examined transaction details. They had been secretly funneling company resources into private accounts, with Cartwright clearly facilitating the cover-up. I carefully backed up every piece of evidence onto multiple encrypted drives, hiding them securely. Each file represented a crucial piece in a puzzle that would soon shatter their world as thoroughly as they had tried to destroy mine. Leaning back in my chair, surrounded by evidence I'd meticulously collected, I felt a grim satisfaction. My silence and patience had paid off. Soon enough, I turned their game of betrayal and deception back upon them, with devastating precision. Late at night, alone in my office, bathed in the sterile glow of my computer screen, I found myself facing the starkest moral dilemma of my life. The evidence I now possessed was explosive, not just damaging, but devastating enough to irreversibly destroy Mike, Sarah, Cartwright, and potentially shake the entire company to its foundations. My heart pounded unevenly, anxiety twisting painfully in my chest. Could I really do this? Could I unleash this storm, knowing full well the lives it would ruin, careers it would obliterate, reputations it would incinerate overnight? The question burned fiercely within me, igniting an internal war between justice and vengeance, morality and self-preservation. A dark, tempting voice whispered in my mind, "They betrayed you. They humiliated you. They deserve every consequence." Yet another, gentler voice argued urgently against the ruthless course of action. Once you unleash this, there's no going back. Innocent bystanders will suffer too. Can you live with that? I rubbed my temples wearily, desperately seeking clarity amidst the turmoil. Suddenly, My phone buzzed sharply, breaking the oppressive silence. Another anonymous message appeared, more provocative and chilling than before. Morality won't protect you. They're already planning their next move. Act now, or they'll bury you. I shuddered involuntarily, my resolve hardening. Whoever was guiding or manipulating my decisions knew exactly how to push me toward the brink. But were they allies or puppeteers, steering me into even greater trouble? Then a thought flashed through my mind, controversial and profoundly unsettling. Perhaps silence and inaction were themselves morally indefensible. Was it truly ethical to let corruption and betrayal thrive, simply because confronting them was uncomfortable and chaotic? My mind raced through scenarios: public outrage, media scandals, potential legal investigations. If I revealed these truths, it wouldn't just punish the guilty. It could tear apart the company, affecting innocent employees who'd worked tirelessly, oblivious to the poison seeping through the upper ranks. Yet, staying silent would make me complicit in the very corruption I despised. Taking a deep breath, I finally stood, fists clenched in quiet defiance. The decision crystallized sharply, despite the moral controversy and inevitable backlash. If choosing justice over loyalty was considered ruthless, then so be it. They'd left me no choice. I would act decisively, unapologetically. Tomorrow, I would unleash the truth, whatever the consequences. In the quiet solitude of my apartment, under the cover of darkness, I created an anonymous social media account, meticulously hiding my digital footprint behind layers of encryption. My heart thundered in my chest, not from fear, but from adrenaline and a cold, focused determination, carefully selecting the most explosive pieces of evidence: emails implicating Mike and Sarah in financial misconduct, footage of their secretive late-night meetings with Cartwright, audio snippets filled with damning admissions. I uploaded each piece methodically, like setting charges on an impending explosion. For a brief moment, I hesitated, my finger hovering above the final button, aware that once I released this storm, there was no turning back. With a single, decisive click, I ignited the fuse. Within minutes, the meticulously curated files erupted across social media, spreading with unprecedented speed. Notifications flooded my screen, shares, reactions, retweets, and comments multiplying at a dizzying pace. Shocked headlines rapidly emerged across online news portals and prominent corporate blogs. Massive corporate scandal exposed. Senior executives caught in web of bribery and betrayal. The comments section filled swiftly with public outrage and bitter debates. Internal company message boards lit up with shock, anger, and confusion. Employees demanded explanations. Shareholders panicked. Media outlets clamored urgently for statements from corporate representatives. This carefully controlled detonation of truth had instantly spiraled into a full-blown media firestorm. Yet what intrigued and unsettled me most were the anonymous responses. Messages hinting at even deeper corruption, implications of other executives secretly involved, suggestions of an entrenched cover-up that reached the highest corporate echelons. Then my phone lit up again, the now familiar anonymous messenger adding fuel to the controversy. Congratulations, you've exposed the truth. But are you prepared for what they'll reveal about you in retaliation? My pulse quickened at this ominous threat. I'd known there would be consequences, yet this direct implication unsettled me deeply. But it was too late for hesitation or regret. I'd committed fully, willingly, stepping into the heart of controversy. As the scandal spread rapidly, creating waves of chaos within and beyond the company, I watched with steely resolve. Mike, Sarah, and Cartwright had set the rules of this ruthless game. But now I'd turned the tables, and the balance of power was shifting dramatically. I leaned back in my chair, knowing the real storm had only just begun. Early the next morning, an emergency company-wide meeting was abruptly announced, causing an unprecedented stir across all departments. I entered the conference room quietly, positioning myself subtly near the back to carefully observe the unfolding chaos. The atmosphere was thick with tension, whispers of speculation buzzing fiercely as employees anxiously awaited answers. Mike and Sarah were already present, seated stiffly at the front, their expressions an unsettling mixture of fear and anger. Mike's usual cocky bravado had vanished entirely, replaced by a ghostly pallor and visible beads of sweat on his forehead. Sarah, typically composed and meticulous, now nervously twisted a pen in trembling fingers, eyes darting furtively around the room as if seeking a hidden enemy. When John Cartwright finally stormed into the room, the murmurs ceased instantly. His typically confident demeanor had transformed dramatically overnight. He looked visibly shaken, his face ashen, eyes burning with barely restrained fury and panic. He slammed down a thick stack of printed emails and documents onto the polished wooden table, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Someone explain what the hell this is," he roared, his voice echoing sharply through the silent room. Emails, bank transactions, audio recordings. I've never seen such outrageous, destructive accusations. Which of you is responsible for this disaster? The room erupted into instant chaos, voices overlapping frantically, accusations flying wildly. Mike abruptly shot to his feet, pointing aggressively at Sarah. "She manipulated everything. Those emails, she faked them," he shouted hysterically, voice cracking under pressure. Sarah leapt up immediately, countering furiously. "Don't even try blaming me, Mike. You were behind all of it. The bribery, the leaks. I have evidence too." Shockwaves rippled across the room. Employees watched in stunned silence, witnessing a public meltdown they'd never imagined possible. Cartwright slammed his fists on the table once more, silencing everyone momentarily. "Both of you shut up," he thundered. "If either of you thinks you'll drag me down with you, you're gravely mistaken." A voice from the back, quiet yet chillingly clear, cut through the tense silence. "If you're innocent, Mr. Cartwright, explain your after-hours meetings. Explain why company money moved secretly to offshore accounts under your supervision." The room fell deathly silent again. All eyes darted toward the speaker, a junior analyst whose quiet bravery stunned even me. Cartwright stared in shock, clearly unprepared for direct confrontation. His mouth opened wordlessly, face reddening with anger and humiliation. Finally, with icy clarity, the chairman rose, speaking with stern authority. "Enough. Given the severity of these allegations and the evidence now publicly available, we will immediately launch an intensive internal investigation. Effective immediately. Mike, Sarah, and Mr. Cartwright, you are suspended from all duties pending this inquiry." Gasps and whispers filled the room as the trio stared in disbelief, finally comprehending the gravity of their situation. As the meeting adjourned abruptly, the oppressive silence that followed was suffocating, fear and suspicion spreading swiftly among the staff. Watching them leave, I felt neither pleasure nor regret, only grim satisfaction. I had ignited this firestorm, fully aware that from now on, nothing in this company would ever be the same again. 2 days after the explosive internal meeting, just when the media frenzy seemed to peak, I made a decision that would shock everyone involved. Late that evening, I carefully drafted a detailed public statement and posted it directly from my verified personal social media accounts, shattering my anonymity once and for all. In the statement, I explicitly revealed myself as the source behind the leaks. My message was clear, unflinching, and brutally honest. I exposed these truths because corruption and betrayal deserve no refuge. I accept full responsibility for revealing these painful realities, no matter the personal cost. Within minutes, my phone exploded with notifications. Colleagues, friends, journalists, everyone demanded immediate explanations. The entire narrative shifted, the scandal intensifying rapidly, transforming me from an anonymous whistleblower into the very public face of a massive corporate controversy. The following morning, I walked calmly into the company headquarters, fully aware that all eyes were upon me. The bustling lobby fell eerily silent, conversations halting mid-sentence, dozens of faces frozen in shock as I passed. But nothing prepared me for the reaction inside the main boardroom. Mike's jaw dropped visibly, his face drained completely of color, eyes widening with horror and disbelief as he finally connected the dots. Sarah stared at me, trembling slightly, lips parted, but unable to utter a single word. Cartwright exploded from his chair in a fit of rage, pointing accusingly at me, his voice shaking uncontrollably. "You, after everything we've done for you, how dare you betray us like this?" I calmly met his furious glare, feeling an unusual yet empowering serenity amidst the chaos. "Betray you?" I replied coldly, deliberately. "No, I simply revealed who you truly are." Before Cartwright could respond, another executive demanded sharply, "Do you realize the consequences of your actions, Jason? The damage you've caused this company?" I turned slowly, addressing the entire room firmly, deliberately provoking controversy with every word. "If speaking the truth damages this company, then perhaps it was never truly stable to begin with. Corruption and betrayal thrived under our watchful silence. If honesty destroys us, then let us rebuild from the ruins." The room erupted into frantic murmurs, whispers of disbelief, admiration, anger, confusion. Reporters outside clamored impatiently, pressing eagerly against the glass windows for glimpses of the unfolding drama. I raised my voice slightly, asserting calm yet undeniable authority. "I understand fully the consequences of my decision. Investigate me, question me publicly, challenge my integrity. But understand this, I regret nothing, and I fear no scrutiny." My final words silenced the room once more, hanging powerfully in the charged atmosphere. As security gently escorted me out to face the waiting media storm, I felt no fear, only grim determination. The revelation was controversial, perhaps career-ending, but in that moment, I felt freer and more powerful than ever before. I'd played their ruthless game and turned their tables completely, proving to everyone, Mike, Sarah, Cartwright, and the entire world, that integrity and courage, however controversial, would ultimately prevail. Within hours of publicly revealing myself as the source behind the devastating leaks, the media exploded in a frenzy unlike anything I'd ever imagined. News vans crowded the streets outside my apartment, bright lights flashing relentlessly, cameras poised eagerly like vultures awaiting their prey. My phone became an endless cascade of calls, messages, and urgent emails. Journalists from major networks, bloggers hungry for sensational details, and even political commentators seeking to leverage my revelations as examples of corporate corruption and bravery. Television screens flashed my name constantly, the headlines stark and provocative. "Hero or traitor? Whistleblower sparks, corporate collapse. Integrity or sabotage? Jason's shocking confession," each headline competing to push the narrative deeper into controversy. Social media became an uncontrollable wildfire. Fierce debates ignited rapidly, splitting public opinion into sharply divided camps. Thousands passionately rallied behind me, praising my courage and integrity. Hashtags like "I stand with Jason" and "corporate whistleblower" surged virally, with advocates sharing personal stories of workplace injustice, inspired by my bravery. They called me a hero, a symbol of truth, someone finally daring to stand up against corruption and greed. Yet, simultaneously, thousands more condemned me viciously, accusing me of irresponsibly destabilizing a major corporation and threatening the livelihoods of innocent employees. Fierce critics branded me a disgruntled employee driven by revenge, a manipulative saboteur whose reckless actions had unleashed unnecessary chaos. Jason, the betrayer and #corporate traitor, trended just as virally, painting me as a selfish opportunist seeking personal attention. Television debates grew increasingly heated, with panelists shouting aggressively at each other, passionately arguing whether my revelations had served justice or merely caused pointless destruction. Experts debated the ethics of my methods. Analysts scrutinized my motives, and psychologists even speculated publicly about my mental health. I watched, stunned yet resolute, as my personal life became dissected before the world's eyes, my privacy evaporating instantly. Even more shocking, former colleagues began stepping forward publicly. Some offered heartfelt testimonials supporting me, applauding my courage for confronting corruption they'd silently endured for years. Others bitterly denounced me, calling my revelations irresponsible and claiming I had destroyed countless careers through thoughtless impulsivity. Amidst the overwhelming chaos, another anonymous message pierced through, startlingly direct and undeniably threatening. "You've stirred up more than you know, Jason. Powerful people aren't pleased. Watch your back. Your troubles are only just beginning." This ominous warning deepened the knot of anxiety already tightening within me. Who were these powerful people? How much danger had I unwittingly invited into my life? The unsettling realization hit hard. This was far bigger and far more dangerous than I'd ever anticipated. Late at night, as cameras finally faded from my doorstep, exhaustion set in heavily. Sitting alone in my darkened apartment, the full weight of my actions settled upon me with overwhelming clarity. I had ignited a firestorm, knowing fully the immense controversy it would bring, yet perhaps never truly grasping the magnitude of backlash and chaos it would unleash. As I read yet another headline branding me simultaneously as a saint and a villain, I accepted an undeniable truth. I had willingly entered into this perilous, controversial journey. Hero or traitor, courageous or reckless, my actions could never be undone. But despite the turmoil, I felt a strange clarity emerging. I'd faced public scrutiny, threats, and even personal attacks, yet here I remained, unbroken and resolute. Whatever awaited next, I would face head-on, no matter how severe the consequences. In the chaotic days following my public revelation, the internal environment within the company rapidly descended into unprecedented turmoil. Trust between departments fractured irreparably. Whispers and accusations flew unchecked, and morale plummeted to dangerous lows. An oppressive atmosphere engulfed the office, as uncertainty, paranoia, and fear became the new normal. A thorough internal investigation, conducted swiftly under relentless media scrutiny, reached a devastating conclusion. Clear, incontrovertible evidence of misconduct implicated Mike, Sarah, and Cartwright directly. I sat silently at the back of the crowded boardroom as senior executives, looking drained and solemn, announced the final decision: immediate termination of all three individuals. The news fell like a thunderclap, echoing harshly through the silent room. Mike jumped to his feet instantly, face flushed crimson, voice shaking violently with a volatile mixture of disbelief and rage. "You can't do this!" he shouted desperately, pointing wildly around the room. "After years of loyalty, you discard me based on lies and manipulations by one bitter employee?" Sarah remained seated, her body rigid, her knuckles white from gripping the edge of the table. Tears welled visibly in her eyes, betraying vulnerability she'd always kept carefully hidden. When she finally spoke, her voice quivered sharply, a haunting blend of anger and despair. "So this is justice? Destroying our lives publicly without giving us a chance to defend ourselves? Is this the fairness our company claims to represent?" But the room's attention soon fixed on Cartwright, whose reaction was by far the most explosive and unsettling. Rising slowly, his face contorted in raw fury, he turned toward me, his voice dropping to a venomous growl. "You think you've won, Jason?" he hissed, eyes blazing with hatred. "This isn't over, not by a long shot. You've no idea the enemies you've made today, or how far we'll go to see you fall even harder." His threat hung heavily in the charged silence, electrifying everyone present. Security moved swiftly forward, cautiously ushering Cartwright, Mike, and Sarah toward the exit. Mike resisted briefly, shouting threats and accusations, demanding a public hearing, before finally being escorted away forcefully. Sarah left quietly, avoiding all eye contact, shoulders shaking slightly with suppressed sobs. Once the room emptied, a chilling silence lingered, underscored by the gravity of what had just occurred. I remained seated, acutely aware of the hostile and judgmental stares now directed at me by those remaining. Colleagues I'd known for years turned away awkwardly, unwilling or afraid to acknowledge me directly. In their eyes, I saw a disturbing blend of respect, resentment, fear, and accusation. A senior board member approached slowly, speaking quietly but firmly. You did what you believed necessary, Jason, but understand clearly the cost. Our company's reputation is shattered. Rebuilding trust will take years. You've made powerful enemies, people whose reach extends far beyond these walls. His words weighed heavily on me, brutally reinforcing the magnitude of the decision I'd made. Yet deep down, beneath layers of anxiety, guilt, and the undeniable fear of consequences yet unseen, I knew this painful outcome had been inevitable. Corruption had thrived too long, unchecked and unchallenged. As I rose slowly, absorbing the brutal reality of the moment, I accepted fully the bitter price I'd chosen to pay. Standing amidst the wreckage of broken careers and shattered trust, I understood something essential. Justice, especially when wielded publicly, would never come without severe, controversial consequences. Yet despite it all, despite the looming threats and the severe backlash awaiting me, I felt strangely resolved. The path I'd chosen was harsh, brutal even, but ultimately necessary. Whatever lay ahead, I would face it without regret. In the quiet aftermath, with the media storm finally beginning to subside, I found myself alone, sitting silently at the window of my darkened apartment. Below, the city lights blinked softly, oblivious to the chaos, betrayal, and heartache that had torn through my life in recent weeks. For the first time, the magnitude of everything I had endured truly sank in, the reality pressing heavy upon my shoulders. I replayed every moment in my mind, from the shock of discovering the hidden recorder beneath my desk, the ruthless manipulation of my words, to the crushing betrayal by people I once trusted implicitly. I saw clearly the choices I'd made, the moral crossroads, the agonizing internal battles, the calculated decision to publicly expose corruption at any cost. It all felt surreal, as though watching a disturbing drama unfold from afar. But it wasn't distant fiction. This was my life, raw and real, with wounds that might never fully heal. A bitter, unsettling clarity emerged as I reflected on what had unfolded. I'd once believed that loyalty, integrity, and trust were foundational values universally shared and honored. Yet I'd painfully learned that in this brutal corporate environment, these virtues were vulnerabilities to be exploited ruthlessly by those driven solely by ambition and greed. Mike, Sarah, and Cartwright had used my trust as their weapon, and I'd unwittingly handed it to them freely. Another haunting lesson loomed starkly. Morality in a competitive, power-driven world was rarely black and white. The line between heroism and betrayal, justice and vengeance, was far blurrier than I'd ever realized. Even as some praised my courage in exposing corruption, others branded me reckless and self-serving, blaming me for collateral damage and unintended consequences. The truth, I now understood, rarely provided clear victories, only complicated trade-offs and bitter compromises. Suddenly, my phone lit up again, breaking my reverie. Another anonymous message appeared, shorter yet more chilling than all previous threats combined. Enjoy your victory, Jason, but remember, every choice has consequences, and some haven't even begun to reveal themselves. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Who continued sending these messages, and how deep did this web of intrigue truly extend? Clearly, my battle wasn't over yet. Perhaps it never would be. Exhausted yet defiant, I leaned back slowly, accepting the harsh truth. The mental and emotional scars I'd accumulated wouldn't fade easily. I had destroyed careers, disrupted lives, and shattered friendships, all in the uncompromising pursuit of truth. I had paid a steep, controversial price, and I knew it would haunt me for years to come. Yet despite the pain, despite lingering threats, and the hostile gaze of powerful adversaries, I found a strange peace in knowing I'd stood firmly by my principles. Courage had carried me into controversy, and integrity had forced me to make decisions I'd never imagined necessary. My journey had taught me clearly that in the pursuit of justice, the cost could be heartbreakingly high, far beyond mere professional reputation or temporary public outrage. It could mean living permanently with doubt, guilt, isolation, and the looming shadow of unknown enemies. In the stillness of that moment, staring out at the city lights, I quietly embraced the unsettling truth. Sometimes, the price of honesty and justice is far greater, more painful, and more complicated than anyone ever anticipates. But would I do it again, knowing everything? Despite the turmoil, the pain, and the dangerous uncertainties ahead, deep within, I already knew the answer. Yes, unquestionably. Because integrity and truth, however controversial, had become my only path forward, no matter how difficult or costly. Thank you all for watching this video. Please comment and let me know what you think about this story. Please like and subscribe to watch more great content on my channel.